My favorite thing about the movie is like it feels like a movie. It feels like a real go to the.
So I just saw Don't Worry Darling recently and I thought it was pretty good. The one thing that stood out to me though, apart from Harry Styles' spotty acting skills, was the music. More specifically the score itself and less of the licensed music. So when the movie ended and everyone was left swooning over how much of a heartthrob Nick Kroll is, I had this unwavering thought in my head, which was, where have I heard this score before? This later turned into the larger question, why does all horror movie music sound like that? But to understand where we are today, we need to know where we started and 3 notable milestones that have been made along the way. Now, if you'll recall in my video review of 1931's Dracula, I made an off comment about the score, or rather, a lack thereof. If I had to nitpick, I would say the plot and the music are definitely this film's weak points. Because this movie was released in the 1930s, I thought it'd have a really cool soundtrack, but a lot of scenes were just quiet, which was kinda lame. Now, what I didn't realize at the time was Dracula was made before movies got their own soundtracks. Movie scores didn't happen until just 2 years later with King Kong in 1933. So then, how do we get from horror soundtrack sounding like this to this? Because at a surface level, they're both achieving the same desired effect. Once I realized that, it brought me to the 1960s classic Psycho. Many will agree that no director did more for the genre than the master of suspense himself, Alfred Hitchcock. Working on a small budget, composer Bernard Herrmann had the challenge of making the score of Psycho simple yet effective. Needless to say, he succeeded, giving us one of the most iconic movie scores of all time. The infamous shower scene, already scary enough, is highlighted by sharp stabs of cord clusters over top of, well, an actual stabbing. Forgoing an actual stabbing sound effect, Herrmann instead used the rhythm of the movement and the sound in tandem, so as to give the ear something to latch onto, since actual stabbings don't make any noise. One of the most infamous horror movies of all time, and certainly one of the most infamous scores of all time. Not only was this film directed, scored, and written by one man, John Carpenter, but virtually everything about the soundtrack is remarkably simple. Pulling inspiration from Bernard Herrmann's score for Psycho, the usage of piercing stabbing noises is present here as well, along with indistinct noises and chords to further intensify the movie. Now, if I had to pick a favorite horror movie, and I'm going to for this video essay, it'd have to be 2016's Get Out. I know that this isn't an unpopular opinion to have. In fact, I bet some of you love this movie just as much as I do. My favorite piece in the film is what's played over the opening credits. It's Swahili, actually. It's such a cool track. I was into this idea of distinctly black voices and black musical references, so it's got some African influences and some bluesy things going on, but in a scary way, which you never really hear. That was Jordan Peele's response when asked about the song's usage in the film, and that last phrase is really worth reiterating, but in a scary way. I can't help but take that to mean that not even he can properly describe what makes that song eerie. Sure, the song loosely translates to a message to the audience about the main character before the movie has happened, but it still maintains that sense of unease. Okay, having just introduced and established 3 films, what do all of these have in common with each other? Well, they utilize what is called... So coming back to Don't Worry Darling, the piece of the score that stood out to me the most was this, titled Victory Chase. Now, it's used in the film over the end scene when Alice is making her escape in the car from the red jumpsuit goons. The song is a perfect example of what is called non-linear sound. The song has no discernible words or phrases that we can latch onto, rather it uses phonic noises that go up and down in range. Think of it like the Uncanny Valley effect, but for sound. Entirely unrecognizable, but distinctly human-made, which is key. Psycho used this by creating high-pitched screeching sounds, as did Halloween, and Get Out used it by, well, I honestly don't really know how. However, I will say that nonlinear sound isn't the only thing that composers use to their advantage when making a score for a horror movie. Things like shepherd tones, LFEs, or low-frequency effects, as well as nonlinear sounds is what can take a movie like Don't Worry Darling and make it much more sinister.